This is the most baffling disappearance in American history. It's me, and along with me are two experts who are about to take you inside the most baffling disappearance in American history. You've met them before? They were the heroes of our series on the lost colony of Roanoke. Now they're here to help us crack this case. The year is 1849. The place is a small, uninhabited island in the Indian Ocean, known as St. Mary's. He tracked down the regiment the men belonged to, discovered they'd all been court-martialed for stealing supplies, and figured out that all three had been sentenced to 3 years of hard labor on St. Mary's. They filled sacks and barrels to the brim, enough to sustain them for at least a week at sea. So unless they ran out of food and water, they never left the island. Blackheart every sailed the Indian Ocean for years, pillaging on Chinese, Portuguese, and British shipping. And though the Fanny wasn't valuable, Every took the 3 soldiers off the island and executed them anyway. The first mate confessed this to a fellow pirate, who later recounted the tale to the governor of Mauritius. But by then, the Fanny and her crew were long gone, leaving behind nothing but a sea of unanswered questions. Or did they? Jones thought they might have tried to row off the island. He searched the shoreline and found 3 empty boats. But there was no way the men could have made it, even if they'd somehow gotten past the strong currents and unpredictable tides. They would have had to row 250 miles to reach the nearest mainland. And no one could row that distance without stopping for rest or supplies. That explained why they were on the island. But how did they get off? He wrote, "It is impossible to conjecture what could have become of the 3 men, nor is there a fact more certain than that they are dead." Jones was right, but not for the reason he thought. All 3 men had indeed vanished, but not off the island. They disappeared aboard the Fanny. The ship's manifest listed only 3 passengers, ruling out any stowaways. Plus, there were no signs of foul play. There was no struggle, no abandoned equipment, and no obvious motive for murder. Join us next time as we head to the Bahamas to investigate another real-life mystery from our own backyards. See you then. In the 1800s, it was a popular stopover for ships traveling between Africa and Asia. Consider the island itself. It's barely a half a mile long and 2 miles wide. It's essentially a giant rock with a lighthouse, nothing else. The shoreline is a sheer drop into the ocean. There are no caves or coves, nowhere for the men to have hidden. And that leads us to the second piece of the puzzle. The first piece of the puzzle was figuring out who these men even were. We know now that the 3 men were British soldiers, part of a detachment of 36 men sent to guard the island's newly built lighthouse. But back then, Jones and his crew didn't know that. All they had to go on was a tattered piece of paper found on board the Fanny, which listed the names of 3 men in their ranks. That's why when a ship called the Fanny arrived on June 1849 with 3 men aboard, they weren't exactly surprised. But when the Fanny left 3 days later without a single soul on board, alarm bells started ringing. How could 3 men disappear from a tiny rock in the middle of the sea? That's what Superintendent Archibald Jones and his team set out to discover. What Jones lacked in forensics, he made up for in old-fashioned police work. With no leads, Jones was forced to do something even more perplexing: rule out the impossible. The men had taken their own provisions with them. When the Fanny arrived on June, the men requested and received permission to stock up on food and water for the journey. With every possible explanation exhausted, Jones was forced to conclude that the men had simply vanished into thin air. When the ship left St. Mary's 3 days after arriving, it was commandeered by none other than Henry Every, the infamous pirate, Al. Today, the case of the 3 missing men remains unsolved, which is why we went to see it for ourselves. The year is 1813. For weeks, anxious crowds have gathered in New York to await the arrival of the Patriot. On board is Vice President Aaron Burr, his daughter Theodosia, and her husband, as well as 3 other passengers. The simplest is that the ship was caught in a severe storm that was reported off the coast that very same day. The ship sank with all hands. But for a story this epic, a simple theory is never enough. In 1869, a doctor was visiting a poor, elderly woman in Nags Head, North Carolina. Many ships had wrecked on the coast in the years gone by, and the area was known for its shipwrecks. Hanging on the wall of the woman's hut was an exquisite portrait of a young woman who looked exactly like Theodosia Burr. The elderly woman claimed it had been salvaged from a shipwreck on the coast many years ago, along with other fine items. Could the Patriot have wrecked on the coast? And could this portrait be the only surviving relic of Theodosia's final journey? But the Patriot never arrived. Weeks turned into months, and still there was no sign of the ship. The fate of Theodosia Buralston remains one of America's oldest and most haunting personal mysteries. A brilliant life extinguished in silence. What do you think happened to the president's daughter? Aaron Burr and Theodosia's husband launched frantic searches, but it was as if the ship had never existed. There are three possible theories as to what happened to the Patriot and its passengers. The second theory is far more sinister. It's a tale as old as the sea itself, a pirate tale. The waters were dangerous, and the Patriot was a sitting duck. One such crew was led by a man known only as Blackbeard. Decades later, two different former pirates gave deathbed confessions. They claimed to have been part of a crew that captured a ship matching the Patriot's description. Every person on board was forced to walk the plank, including a beautiful, brave woman who they believed was the vice president's daughter. But the strangest theory of all revolves around a mysterious painting. Storm, pirates, or a shipwreck that left behind a ghostly portrait?